And we welcome you to the University of Notre Dame. Welcome to Notre Dame's Senior Alumni 2021 Notre Dame Football Kickoff Preview. Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Scanlon. Well, we're coming to you live from the Notre Dame studios in Notre Dame Stadium, and there really is a lot of excitement in the air. The students are back. The campus is alive, and we're going to talk Fighting Irish football for the next hour. And that's really a great thing to do because right now it's about the games, the players, the coaches, not pandemics, not protocols, at least for now, and bring on Florida State, just 12 days away. Joined in studio by a gentleman who's no stranger to Notre Dame fans and national figure, Mike Golic. Mike, it's great to have you here, an analyst. We've seen you on radio, TV. You're doing football this fall as well. Notre Dame class of '85, Irish standout and an NFL standout. Thanks for taking part.
My pleasure. Great to talk Notre Dame football. There's nothing wrong with that, and I get to do it from these studios that were not even a thought when we were here. That's for sure. So this is fantastic. So and you said it right. I mean, to be able to not have the protocols, fingers crossed, for now. And it's seemingly going to normal, even though I know with the Delta variant, it has some issues out there. But at this point, it looks like we'll have full stadiums, give or take, and get ready to go.
Absolutely. All excited about that. In a few minutes, we'll be joined by Eric Hansen, the Notre Dame insider from the South Bend Tribune. And a little later on, Irish Sports Daily's Jamie Uyeyama, and we'll be taking your questions as well. But right now, Brian Kelly, 12th season, 102 up, 39 down, September 5th, 12 days away for his 12th season in Florida State. And we had a kind of a Florida State day today, 90 degrees, humid. So I'm sure he feels like a football coach again.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. I'm sure the players don't feel like practicing in this stuff. They always say, let's practice in what we're going to play in. It sounds great until you put the pads on and walk out. And by the time you're done stretching, you're in a full drench. Anybody who's ever played and been in that position knows you dread practice. But one of the other big differences of college and the NFL is in college, you're just hitting the same people over and over again. So, I mean, you are really looking forward to the start of the season to hit, a different color jersey, unlike the NFL when you're practicing with different teams and have preseason games. So, these guys have been hitting the same people over and over and over again, trying to get in the best shape and make it for real coming up here next week.
A lot of changes since last year. New man at quarterback, new defensive coordinator. A lot to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the offensive side of the ball, Mike, to start with. Tommy Rees, offensive coordinator, and he's got some weapons.
Well, he does have some weapons, but he also has to deal with a new quarterback. Ian Book, who's been here for 33, 34 years. At least it seems that way. I mean, it's unbelievable how. And now down in New Orleans, hopefully things go well for him down there. But that's one of the big differences you have to look at is Tommy and Ian got themselves in a great groove. I mean, this was kind of an unspoken language of knowing the offense and really kind of being in each other's head a little bit to run the offense. Ian kind of that coach on the field to project to the rest of the players out there. Now Tommy's got to coach a brand new guy, even though Jack Cohn has some experience, obviously, at Wisconsin, still not in this system. And that's one of the biggest differences this year for all of college football is that transfer portal. You are seeing just multiple or double-digit numbers of transfers going to different teams. And that's part of the recruiting now. You can't just recruit high school seniors. You have to recruit these, whether it's a younger transfer or an older one like Jack to come in and fill the void there, something a lot of teams haven't done, but now they have to do. So Jack has to learn a new system, and we've always talked about that, learning a new system. There's not many new formations out there, but how you call them. It is like learning a new language. He's got to learn a new language. He's got to do it in front of an offensive line that has massive changes. He's got to throw to wide receivers who in this 2018 class of wide receivers is now really getting their chance to shine. You got a stud young tight end and you got a deep backfield. So that can help Jack out, a nice safety valve in a tight end. And certainly, Notre Dame is known for running the ball, but let's see how well those five up front can mesh.
Notre Dame with 3 preseason All-Americans named just yesterday. Kyron Williams, of course, in the middle. Jared Peterson at center. stabilizing factor in an offensive line at this point. And of course, Kyle Hamilton at safety. But on the offensive side, like you mentioned, it's, tight end, Michael Mayer, elite player. But the thing now, you played defensive line. Would you lick your chops if you knew that a freshman left tackle was starting a la Blake Fisher?
Well, I mean, most likely you would, yes. I mean, you do get some freshmen that can step in and they're man amongst boys and they can step in and get the job done. And we'll just have to, we don't know. You go through practice. I know he's missed a little time as well, but you go through practice, but it really doesn't, you really can't tell anything till you get going, until that defense is live on the other side of you, till they're trying to confuse you. And that's the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest changes that has gone on, is defenses are much more sophisticated. Defenses will disguise so much more. So it's not a lot of times about sending more guys than the offense has to block. It's about confusing the blockers up front so they don't get one of the men that are coming. So they can still be bringing 4, maybe 5, where you'd have enough to block them. But if you get confused in who's coming, then you can miss somebody. And that's what you're hoping to do with a line that's replacing 4, and certainly a true on the left. And what will be interesting is a rotation at left tackle. Until somebody really grabs that spot and solidifies it, there's going to be some youth out there, and there's going to be probably a couple of people out there. I doubt a true is going to walk out there and play 80 plays. If he does, then he's probably doing a hell of a job. So let's see if there's a rotation system out there.
Brian Kelly talked about Fisher as being an elite player. The footwork, the strength, he said he could be one of the best ever. Let's see how it goes. We've also got Kane Madden on the offensive line from Marshall, second-team All-American, graduate transfer. He may help stabilize that offensive line a bit.
Oh, a little fire plug in the middle, right? And again, here's one of those transfer guys who is a player. It's not like an inexperienced guy. So it is somebody that can solidify quickly, on that offensive line, because he has the experience. And now you have an experienced guy, to help along those lines, and anybody that can give the left tackle as much help as they can, left guard, center, however the call's being made, to let the left tackle at least know what's going on and know where he has to block, again, because the defense is going to try and disguise a whole lot. But that's what I'm talking about. You get between a lineman who's played a ton at another school, a quarterback who's played a ton at another school. So they come in with the experience. It's just how quick do you pick up the system for a quarterback, and how quick as an offensive lineman do you mesh with the other 4 guys.
Speaking of systems, new defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman from Cincinnati.
Love him.
Wants to play fast, wants to play aggressive, wants to take the thinking process out of the defensive mindset. You are a defensive guy. What happens now? How do you change the system, the schemes, and get everybody right out of the box?
You're going to have every player licking their chops because they get to attack. I mean, when I was in the NFL and I went to play in Philadelphia, and Buddy Ryan was the head coach and the D coordinator, you knew what you were going to be doing. You knew you were going to attack. He was saying, he's got athletes, I'm going to just attack. And that's a mark. What a great guy. We knew who we were going to lose our D coordinator from. We probably got an extra year with him last year. Now he's off to Vanderbilt, and congrats to him. But to get Marcus Freeman from Cincy, and knowing the kind of defense he runs, I am really looking forward to which play. We know what Kyle Hamilton can do, but when you're talking about the D-line and linebackers, because that linebacker room is deep, and you have some depth, especially in the interior of that D-line with a couple of guys. But how he uses those guys, will somebody be standing up a little more now, in the way he can mix and match his defense? So who are the guys that are going to be set free a little more? A guy like Afosky, is that a guy we're looking forward to? I am really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do. He, to me, is the guy to watch in this defense, as far as how aggressive and how much he is going to be attacking.
We'll get back to the defense. Let's take a look at the schedule, and it is a brutal schedule for a 5-game stretch there in September into end of October. Of course, we're starting out at Florida State on Sunday night, Labor Day weekend, and then coming home for Toledo, then comes Purdue, and then we go to Chicago, Mike, for Wisconsin. And look at this stretch: Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, Southern Cal, and North Carolina. Oh, baby.
Well, and you look at some of these games, what there's 6 games this year where teams are coming off a bye, so that's a way for a team to heal up a bit. But yeah, I mean, listen, this is what happened when you play at Notre Dame. I always love the people, the Notre Dame haters out there saying Notre Dame always plays a soft schedule. I mean, come on. I mean, you got to be kidding me, with who we're playing. And a lot of it depends on that year. Some year those teams are better than other years. So it can look a little easier at times when some of those teams are down, but it's certainly harder at other times when those teams are up. So, I mean, to me, it's just another Notre Dame schedule. It's something that I was used to seeing when I came here and my brother Bob got here in '75. Same thing I was used to seeing when my brother Greg and I were playing here in the early '80s. And same thing my boys Mike and Jake saw when they were here, got here in 2008 and 9, played through 12 and 13. You're playing these same schools. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. So to me, Notre Dame is always playing the big boy schools and the hard schedules.
Right. Well, you mentioned your brother, because you're not a senior alum yet, but I think number 55, Bob Golic, is a senior alum now.
Yes, he is.
And we can classify him as part of the group here. Hopefully he's watching tonight. So let's bring in our Notre Dame insider, powered by the South Bend Tribune, Eric Hansen. Eric has been covering Notre Dame since 1988. We're not going to give him a hard time about being an Ohio State grad in 1983, but lead writer for Notre Dame football since 2005. Eric, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for cutting me a break on the Ohio State lineage.
So, we talked a little bit about the offensive line. You were watching the offensive line, you told me, the last time that the media was allowed in. Tell us a little bit about what you saw in the trenches and what your impressions are.
Well, when you watch Notre Dame's defensive front against the offensive line, the defensive front wins most of those battles right now. They're just better. Their defensive line is their best position group on this team. But I'm seeing strides with the offensive line. That's what I really am encouraged by. And I think Mike mentioned this, Jarrett Patterson's leadership, being in the middle and being kind of the quarterback of that offensive line with the calls and getting the protections right. I think that's why we're seeing kind of an accelerated growth curve with these guys. I do like Blake Fisher at left tackle. He would be the second true freshman in 50 years, offensive lineman to start an opener for Notre Dame, and Sam Young was the other one. But I really like him. I think what's a little bit ticklish is having kind of a new guy next to him, and Zeke Correll, Rocco Spindler, but Kane Madden is much more comfortable on the right side, the transfer from Marshall. And so they're pretty veteran on the right side and young on the left side. But I do like the potential. It's just how long will it take for them to get the chemistry to the point where they can play against really elite fronts like Wisconsin and Cincinnati, which are, pretty early in the schedule, or at least in the middle of the schedule.
And that's very true about young next to young, or inexperienced next to inexperienced. Who else knows that? The defense. When the game planning. So they're gonna. What you try and do is you obviously want to beat somebody physically, but if you can get their head to spin a little bit, you can get smoke to come out of their ears a little bit, and get them to think for a split second, you're going to win. And that's what they'll try and do until that group, especially that side of the line, can become a little more comfortable.
You can imagine if Spindler gets time on that offensive line as well. The good news is you've got 2 freshmen beginning to grow into a long career at Notre Dame. But yeah, it's amazing. Hey, Eric, you wanted to talk a little bit about the wide receivers, and everyone talks about the wide receivers coming into the year, who's coming back, who can get it done, Avery Davis, Lawrence Keys, but Lindsey. But I guess one of the big questions too is, can Kevin Austin stay on the field and stay healthy?
Wow, if he can, it's just a difference. When you talk to the team and say, who's a tough cover? I mean, it's always Kevin Austin. You say, who had a great summer? Kevin Austin. And I think he's one of the top 5 players on the roster, but he has 6 career catches. And so, he has to stay healthy. He had 1 year where he was suspended. His freshman year, he's kind of immature, didn't get on the field a whole lot, but he's a game changer for them. Really, when you look at their whole senior group, beyond Avery Davis, who's probably the most proven of them, and he's a grad senior, but Lindsey, Joe Wilkins, Lawrence Keys, that whole group, they've always had potential, but they're kind of holding them back. If they can all kind of emerge together, they're going to have something at wide receiver. I mean, they're definitely going to be faster and more athletic than they were last year at that position.
Well, we have a chance. Let's bring in Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily while we have a chance. Jamie is a recruiting specialist for Irish Sports Daily, but also gets into some game prep and some analysis, et cetera. And Jamie, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We're talking about young players, and certainly we've seen some great recruiting last year and the class that's ahead of us as well. But how do you think the recruiting last year is going to impact filling in those gaps that Brian Kelly has to deal with in 2021?
Well, I think on defense, how they've recruited and developed, especially under Clark Lee, that they don't have to fill that many gaps, frankly. The front seven, it's probably the deepest that I've seen in the last 6 years. They just have so many good bodies, guys that could normally be elevated like a level up. A lot of the second team guys would have been starters on previous other teams. So there's a lot of talent there, and there's a lot of young talent in the secondary too, even though, you have obviously Kyle Hamilton, but you have some of these other corners that have just kind of been waiting, and they're progressing and developing too. I think on the offensive side of the ball is where you're going to see a lot of these young guys play. Obviously, you mentioned Blake Fisher. It'd be shocking if he wasn't the starting left tackle. I think everyone assumes that. And he looks the part. I haven't seen a freshman left tackle look like him. And he frankly looks like a guy more like an Alabama kid in terms of his body type and where he's ready to play. So, physically and just athletically, he's a guy who's ready to play right away. But I think after that, they have some guys at tight ends. Mitchell Evans is someone that could play this year. Obviously, they're deep there, so I don't think they need him, but I think he's someone that could play this year. Was a guy who was a high school quarterback in Ohio, probably a little bit underrated, a little bit under the radar, but he's just such a great athlete, and he's adapting to the position so well. He enrolled early in the spring. And then a receiver, Lorenzo Styles Jr., I know in the last open practice that Notre Dame had on Thursday, he was dominant. He had easily probably the best practice we've seen from him. He was also in the spring and looked like a guy that he could help right away. And then you throw in Deion Colsey, who was, the bigger bodied receiver, and you don't see those obvious opportunities for these guys because, like Mike said, they have that 2018 class, and a lot of those guys, their time right now. But you look at where Styles and Colsey, if there's an injury or if there's something that pops up, those guys can help right away, I believe. And then I think, and then the other thing is in the backfield, Logan Diggs is the guy that has really impressed all fall camp and really kind of shown up and looks like a guy that he could play. The only issue is that they got three really good backs in front of them. Notre Dame's backfield is loaded. So it's tough to see him getting lots of opportunities, but you never know, right? The season's long. Obviously, guys get nicked up. They've had seasons before where guys had to miss games, and they want to kind of manage the load too. But he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's playing and contributing this year.
Mike, let's talk some defense. Well, I know you mentioned the depth up front and the linebackers and the D line that we're talking about. Talk a little defense for all those bodies that we've got available.
Well, that's been going to be a huge key because as we were just talking about, I think what's so key now is recruiting. How well is the next? You want to talk about next man up. You're seeing on the old line, but that's also where the portal comes into play, how they get a quarterback and a right guard to be experienced. But you look, as we all keep saying, 2018 wide receiver class, chance to shine. Well, let's see. Recruiting, how do they do? The young offensive line, you got a chance to play. Recruiting, how are they going to do? Any youth on the defensive side of the ball, how are they going to do? But they are loaded up front. That's why, again, I am so excited to watch how this line and linebacker play with how Marcus Freeman is going to mix this thing up and attack. And I think with his scheme, you're going to see guys running free more than we've seen in the past. And I think that's going to be huge. Obviously, that forces an offense out of what they want to do when you have a guy busting through the line. But I think, just as I talked about on a young offensive line, you try and confuse them. I think with Marcus's defense, not only the attacking style, but the ability to confuse an offense as well. You could see some big plays behind the line of scrimmage. Plus that D line we have. I mean, my gosh. I mean, these guys play on the other side of the line.
Right.
I mean, it's not a read and react, kind of catch, two gap thing, or even if you're in a one technique or a three technique, you're not just catching, you're attacking. So these guys got great hand play, and they're playing on the other side of the line. Now you're playing 1 yard deep, and now you're making that back run east and west. That's going to be a win when you got speed on the outside.
And it helps the DBs too, because that pressure on the quarterback is going to help them in their coverage. They don't have to cover, hopefully, as long as they have in certain situations. Hey, Eric Hansen, so tell me a little bit about what you've been seeing from the corners. I know you want to talk a little bit about them and what you've seen in some of the practices.
Yeah, I think going into spring, that was kind of the kind of bite your lip position group, because there was not a lot of experience. And then there was also Marcus Freeman's philosophy of really wanting to play aggressive with the corners, play a lot of press coverage, play a lot of man. Clark Lee would probably cover them up a little bit more and try to camouflage them a little bit. They're coming out and being very, very aggressive. I think the thing that I like about the corner group is you're starting to see that, and not just from the first three. Although I would say this, I feel comfortable with the first three, which is Cam Hart, Clarence Lewis, and Tariq Bracy. I think you want them to play most of the snaps right now, but they're able to get in the receiver's face, press them, and I think they have a pretty athletic group there.
And we said we'd take a few questions. Here's one from Mike, class of 78 from the Notre Dame Club of the Jersey Shore. He wants to know how tight end Kevin Ballman is doing in his second year and what type of role can he play?
Who do you want to take that? Me?
Whoever wants to take it, jump right in.
I'll go ahead and take that since Brian Kelly was talking about Kevin the other day, and Kevin's been impressed. Caught a lot of balls in traffic in the red zone. Brian Kelly said last year he was kind of a bull in the china shop, and that he really had to get better in terms of, refining his route running and refining what he was doing. And he's a talented guy. I think, Jamie alluded to this in terms of some of the younger guys. Even I think they have 5 tight ends they can put on the field. Obviously, Michael Mayer is a star, but those other 4, they're going to be able to do something with multiple tight end sets when they want to do it, and Kevin's going to be part of that.
Mike, I'll ask you and Jamie this one. This comes from another Mike. Given the top talent continuing to go to schools like Alabama and Clemson, recognition as an NFL prospect, et cetera, do you believe the college football playoff and now the name, image, license situation will help change the way schools recruit? And also, if the football power dynamic can change because of those situations?
Well, I mean, you heard, and I love how some people said with Nick Saban, he did it kind of, secretly, talking about Bryce Young, their quarterback, making $1 million before, even stepping on the field. He didn't do it secretly. He did it loud and proud. I mean, what a great way to talk about recruiting. Listen, come to Alabama, not like they have a tough time getting 5 stars anyway,
right?
And you can make a ton of money legally before you even step on the field. So I think what it's going to come down to with NIL, name, image, and likeness, is how quickly you can buy in. Does the school get a third-party group to help out with this? How quick is the transition? Because it was a wild, wild west, and I'm glad it happened in the summertime, where it was basically ask for forgiveness, not permission. I'm going to sign a deal. I'm going to get some money, because there really aren't any rules right now, and I'm glad it happened in the summer. So I'm not sure if it will let's all be honest. What is this really doing? It's taking the under table the money and it's putting it on top of the table.
Right.
That's what it's doing right now. And it's giving more people an opportunity to do it, like groups like the O-line, you know, at Notre Dame with Mission Barbecue and others around the country doing that as well. So I don't know if it will help recruiting, because I think the talent we're talking about are all going to the top schools anyway. And I think the top schools hopefully are all buying into what's going on right now. And that stuff is going to be readily available for the recruits.
Jamie, what have you heard as far as NIL and as you look in the recruiting picture in the crystal ball?
Well, I think it's always going to be a factor with guys, and that's why Notre Dame gives out NIL presentations. That's what all the major schools are doing, right? I mean, not just major schools, every school's doing it because they have to. That's just the fact of the matter now, that this is part of the game. It's part of recruiting, right? But, you know, I completely agree with Mike that it's going to be, I don't think it's going to impact smaller schools going to be able to make a leap up the rankings because of it, because I think the big brands are still going to be the ones that command, you know, the players building on their own personal brand, right? So I think when it comes down to it, if you look at Notre Dame and I think about like a guy like Brady Quinn, if Brady Quinn, if there was NIL during, you know, Brady Quinn's time, especially when he came back for his senior year, he would have made a lot of money, right? And he would have made a lot of money, and Jimmy Clausen might have been a guy who came in and got a lot of money before he did, because he was a very hyped up recruit, right? So there's a lot of cases where you could see, you know, Notre Dame guys making a lot of money because of the national brand. I don't think it's something where you're going to see Ohio State or Clemson and Alabama have a further gap away from Notre Dame, because when Notre Dame, you know, is good and has those players are going to get those kind of deals as well.
All I know is when I was a senior and turned 21, I'd have tried to get a deal over the backer. That's what I would have done. I tried to work that deal. And listen, for anybody says, oh my God, this is going to ruin college football. No, it's not.
Right.
It's not going to ruin college football. I'm sure we'll get into conference realignment. It's not going to ruin college football. Saturday's going to show up. People are going to show up to these games, and college football is going to be as exciting as ever.
Absolutely. Let's talk the backfield for a moment. Talking about the NIL, and Kyron Williams was one of the kids who wanted. He said, "I want a scooter deal because I'm tired of walking around campus." But Chris Tyree, Kyron Williams, Sibo Flemister, just to start in the backfield, gives Tommy Rees a lot of options in the run game.
Well, I mean, this is what you do when you may be not sure about a position like an O-line with again, a transfer coming in and with youth on that line and replacing 4 players. And your receivers, you're still going to wait to see. You think we kind of know who may be the guy, who not, but they still have to show it. But you got a tight end and you got backs. So Tommy knows what he's doing. Tommy understands where the bread can be buttered, where he knows he can make a play with the tight ends, and he knows he can make a play with these backs, whether running the ball or catching it out of the backfield. Use them to your strength. They can help while everybody else is getting caught up, you know, to speed if they need that. So it is all about using your strength, and it's about rolling these guys through, because they are absolutely loaded, you know, at the running back position. So I'm looking forward to seeing these guys, and you got enough of them where you can work them. You know, you can really, really work them.
Eric, tell me a little bit about Jack Cohn and how he's fared in practice. We've heard a lot about his ability to be very consistent, maybe to extend the field a little bit, throw the deep ball a little bit more maybe than Ian Book did. What have you guys seen in regard to our new starting quarterback, Jack Cohn?
Well, Brian Kelly said that Jack won the job largely on consistency, and you can see that in his practice. You know, I think we're still going to see a better version of Jack, let's say in September and October, than we're seeing now, as he, again, kind of takes the reins, takes the leadership, gets more comfortable in the offense, gets more comfortable with all the personnel. But you referenced the deep ball, and I get asked about that a lot. I don't know that he's better at it than Ian Book, but he's more willing than Ian Book. You see him, you know, flinging it down the field in practice. And I would assume he's going to do that in games, and he has the receivers to do it. You know, I think there were times that Ian just didn't feel like that was a great read or a great play to throw it down the field. But, Jack Cohn, I think certainly is a quarterback with a high floor, and we're going to find out how high his ceiling is this season.
Right. And behind him, Drew Pine, of course, an experienced quarterback coming back. And then the freshman, Tyler Buckner, who has raised a lot of attention off his play in the spring game and what he's done here in the fall as there's three quarterbacks in the mix at this point.
I think Tyler Buckner is one of the most intriguing players on the roster for the present and the future. He's a guy that I think they would consider having a niche package for, maybe in the red zone. I don't think Brian Kelly's committed to that, but they did that with Ian Book at the beginning of 2018 before he became the starter. I also think he's the most talented quarterback on the roster. I think he's got the strongest arm, he's the best runner, he's the best athlete, and he's also way the least experienced. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of reps he gets in practice as they try to develop him, because Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner are likely going to be your 2022 starter opening up in Columbus, Ohio.
You had to get Columbus in again.
Yeah,
He did. Yeah.
Finds a way.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Mike, what do you think? There's the emphasis on the quarterback. Is there always too much emphasis on the starter and who's behind him? And
That's the position. I mean, without question, there's too much. They get too much praise, they get too much criticism. That's how it works. But you know what? Every quarterback knows that, so we can sit there and say it. But I think for Jack, what's going to help him being in a new system is who is he going to get that connection with? And until he gets that connection, Michael Mayer had 42 catches last year. Now, it all depends on how teams are going to play him. Are they going to bracket him? Are they going to have somebody over the top on him? Are they just going to try and man him at times? All depends on the defense. But here's a guy that can get 60 to 70 catches. And a tight end is a great security blanket for a quarterback, and also a back out of the backfield. A check down, just say, take it safe, get it to the running back, get him in space, and he can really help you along until you find that, because it's hard in these practices, X amount of practices anymore that you get. Again, you're playing against the same defense all the time, not really any different looks. Who are you going to get that rapport with? That's something you're really kind of not going to find out until the games go. But I tell you what, you throw it to that tight end and those backs, you can count on those guys right now to, if nothing else, to keep the chains moving. It's the most horrid thing for a defense on 3rd and 6, and the offense gains 6.5, and they can move the chains and they keep going. And that's what. And I know they talk about Jack and they say, oh, he's a good manages the offense. That's like a swear word, to quarterbacks anymore, just to manage the offense. We'll see him make some plays down the field as well, but it is going to take a little bit of time till you find out who he really starts to get that rapport with.
Jamie, what do you think of the from a recruiting standpoint with Jack, with the quarterbacks, et cetera, and then surprise players that you might have your eye on the offense, and who's looked good to you in practice, and who are you keeping an eye on throughout this upcoming fall?
Well, I mean, certainly Tyler Buckner, as Eric said, he's just an intriguing name to watch. And I don't know that he's ever going to, ever start a game this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he played a role, just because he's just got some dynamic to his game, right? Especially as a runner, right? So whether or not they design a package for him or not, I mean, we'll see. Obviously that's not the kind of thing they're going to reveal in fall camp. So we'll have to see what's there. But really, like the main thing for me is the receivers there. And we talk about Mayer, and you're going to keep mentioning him because obviously he's going to be an All-American candidate, one of the best tight ends in the country. And what I'm really intrigued by at the receiver position, and just the pass catchers in general, is Mayer last year, even as a freshman, was the go-to guy on 3rd down for Notre Dame's offense. And I think obviously he's going to be that again, but can they find another guy, and especially that because last year, Javon McKinley ended up being a big play guy and developed into that. But I wouldn't say he was the guy that Ian Book looked to on a 3rd down to move the sticks. So can Kevin Austin be that guy? And I think I think he has the ability to be that. And I think if you have that and you have a Mayer there and then possibly a Kyron Williams, because I think Kyron Williams can be used as a receiver in a lot of different ways. And I think the backfield in general, him and Chris Tyree can both be used as receivers. You can line up those guys in the slot. But, what it comes down to is Notre Dame needs to be more explosive as well. They're obviously, the offensive line is a lot different this year. They're probably not going to play as heavy with as much, 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. So they're going to play a lot more 11 with 3 wide receivers. And I think what it comes down to is they need to have more explosive plays, and whether that's deep down the field and Cone, targeting players there, or guys making plays after the catch. And that's where, your Braden Lenzy's, your Lawrence Keys, your Avery Davis's, Lorenzo Styles, who I mentioned as a freshman is the guy that I think could make an impact too. Those guys are going to have to make plays, and it doesn't have to be the same guy every week. But if they have enough guys that are contributing and adding those explosives, I think that adds a new dimension to the offense. So that's something I think that can make the offense better than it was last year, even with the changes on offensive line, if they're able to get enough playmakers out of the receiving group.
So I wonder from both of you guys and whoever wants to take it from the recruiting standpoint, whenever we mention, say, recruiting, it's always, high school kids coming to college. But now it's the transfer portal. How involved, I'm getting ready to call games for other teams, and I'm seeing 4, 5, 6 transfer players that are starting for other teams, in Power 5 conferences. Here you see, obviously, the kid on the O-line, Madden and Cone, is older guys as transfer guys coming in. How much do you see Notre Dame continuing to do that, bringing in those 5th-year guys, 4th-year guys that they can just plug in and play right away?
I could see them doing that. And I think this year is a little bit unique because of, Ian was so experienced, and they wanted to have another experienced guy to compete there at quarterback. And then they lost so many guys on the offensive line. So they wanted to have another guy to compete there. So I get that. And I think you'll see that. You'll see the Ben Skoronix, right? You'll see the Nick McLeod. You'll see that from Notre Dame. And I think they'll sprinkle in there. But I don't see them going to getting some of these guys who are in their 2nd or 3rd year, like a lot of these schools, like Florida State this year. And obviously they're in a little bit of a rebuilding mode. They took 10 transfers this year. And I think they're going to have close to a dozen starters, guys who didn't start out at Florida State. So, some of those guys are from this current transfer year, and the other guys are other transfers from before. That's a lot of guys that you didn't really build up within your program. And I think, that's what they're doing because they need those quick fixes. And you're going to see that from, I think, a lot of schools, in the future that kind of need that. It's the new JUCO route that some of these, right. And but I just don't see that happening for Notre Dame, especially with the way that even though they're going to lose kids in the transfer portal, it's bound to happen, right? That's bound to happen. But I think they've done such a good job of building up the culture within the program, the level of accountability within the program, of developing the guys. You see the progress year after year of guys just getting better. And guys want to be a part of winning. And as long as you're winning like this, I think you're going to continue to see Notre Dame be, even though they want to recruit better than they have, there's still going to be a development program, and that's still what they're going to be about. So I don't see them dipping into it. Maybe Eric sees it differently. I think just little bits here and there, like you'll see with those 2 guys this year, with the couple guys last year, but I don't see that being ever a thing where they're going to get a half dozen guys. I don't see that ever happening.
I'll add to what Jamie said. I thought Jamie had a great answer there. And what I'll add is, Notre Dame is recruiting at a higher level too. They're getting more players that are, able to come in early and contribute. You look at the 22 class and the start of the 23 class, and, their recruiting is upgrading. The other thing that would be difficult for Notre Dame is they can't really take advantage too much of undergrad transfers. It's different rules. For a grad transfer, they have their degree, they can get into Notre Dame. It's very easy. With the undergrads, it's a real puzzle to get the credits to fit. And I know that that's happened with some of their other sports, men's and women's basketball, where it's a little bit of a puzzle and there's some people they can't take. So I would agree with Jamie on all the other points.
Here's a question from Gary in Texas. Speaking of recruiting and program building, what do you believe needs to change with respect to Notre Dame football in order to become a championship-winning organization and program in the next 5 years? And I'll just say that over the last, since 2018, Brian Kelly's 33-5. That's 4th ranked amongst all the major programs in the country. So what do we think has to change, Mike?
Well, I mean, listen, that basically is a veiled question of why can't we be up there where Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are every single year,
right?
You know, in the playoffs. And what you see Notre Dame is go up there and come down a little bit between, 10 and 20 or 5, 10 and 20, then go up again, make the playoffs a couple years later, and we know if it goes to 12, that could be a different story, 12 teams. But you know what? We know the standards are different here. So that's always been talked about as well. Do you lower the standards? I've always said no to that. I mean, I know a lot of people have said no to that. And sometimes you're just not going to get the player that wants to come here for that reason. He's going to want to go somewhere else. So I don't know the answer to that, because we're talking about, again, you're talking about 5 stars here, and 5 stars see what goes on in Clemson, what goes on at Ohio State, what goes on at Alabama. It sees those players win. It sees those programs win titles, and it sees double-digit guys going in the draft every year. That's what makes these 4- and 5-star eyes light up. You get that at Notre Dame. You get guys that go to the NFL without question all the time. But I think it's the age-old question, guys. I don't know if you agree. It's sometimes the standards at Notre Dame make it a little more difficult for some players to come into to school here.
I'll let you go next, Jamie.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I agree that the standards, it does make it more difficult, but I think it's something that Marcus Freeman has talked about this offseason too, where they've targeted guys and been able to land guys that it's not just looking for the Notre Dame kid and just targeting that guy and say, okay, and eliminating the board like there. They're targeting guys who are elite football players and then, seeing if they can fit at Notre Dame and going from there, right? And I think that's shown in this class. And it's why, right now they have a top 2 or 3 ranked class. It's probably not going to finish top 2 or 3. It's probably going to be somewhere 6 to 10, but that's better than they've been doing. And I think they've done a fantastic job in this class. And I think that's really what it is too, is that they're so close and they've been right there, as Pat mentioned, how they've been since 2018 and that 33 wins since then. And they're so close and they're on the precipice, and then they get there, and then obviously they go against these juggernauts. And really what it is too is I think the coaching staff is good enough. I think they've done all these things. I just think it's a few players here and there, right? And note where Notre Dame goes to Georgia in 2019, and they have Chase Claypool and they have Cole Kmet, but Kevin Austin is suspended, so they don't have that guy. And Alabama might have a kid suspended, but they have another guy they can go to. And that's just what it is. Those teams have more depth when it comes to the elite guys. So, what you got to do, like what you got to do at receiver as they're bringing in Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colby. And these guys look like right away that they have star potential eventually at Notre Dame. Probably not going to be stars this year, but they have star potential. And then you got to do it in the next class. And they just landed in the month of August. They landed DJ Williams out of Mater Dei and Tobias Merriweather out of Washington. And those are top 100 level receivers, right? And you got to just keep stacking on top of that. And I think they're doing a great job of developing and getting better. And talked about the depth of the defensive line and all that. And, offensive line, they've always had done a great job there. And it's just continuing to just build and just get a little bit better, because they're right there. They just have to just close on a few more guys. And I really couldn't agree more with what Marcus Freeman's doing and his approach to it, because I think it's paid off in this class.
Yeah, and
I was
I'll
going to
add
say
to what,
closing. closing, Marcus Freeman seems to have brought a new energy and a new approach to recruiting. And he's landed some top-notch recruits. So hopefully they get here and everything continues along. But yeah, his approach, he's landed, Eric, some really outstanding recruits as you look at the linebackers and the defensive players that Freeman has been able to land.
Yeah, Tom Lemming, who's been doing the recruiting analyst thing for decades, said this is the best Notre Dame linebacker group in 30 years. And you look at the start they have with the 2023 class, all three of those recruits are top 200 recruits. One's a top 10 recruit in one of the services, and they're all defensive players. And, adding to what Jamie said, they're getting kids on campus earlier. They're getting young players. They're offering earlier. And that was a problem. Notre Dame was trying to play catch up with elite guys who Alabama had been talking to for a couple of years, Ohio State, and trying to form that relationship and microwave it. And I think they're just doing a much better job of planning. But yeah, the defensive recruiting is outstanding right now. But I think they need an elite quarterback. I think in that 2023 class, they need to land somebody like a Mac Jones or a Trevor Lawrence or somebody like that is going to be a first-round draft choice someday.
I agree with that. And I also agree of the way they're recruiting now and the depth, but then you throw in what's going on now. Now then you got to keep them, right?
Yeah.
Then they can't go into the portal. All of a sudden you stack it like you guys are talking about, which is absolutely the way to do it. But then one guy is sitting a little bit too much and he's like, I could be playing somewhere else. So they're going to jump in the portal and get that free move. So it's stacking. It's the way they're doing it. And then can you hang on to those guys and let the system build that way?
Absolutely. And you've got Steve Angeli, quarterback, in the mix as a commit as well out of New Jersey, another high-ranked prospect. Let's talk about one of the guys who's definitely elite no matter who you talk to on defense, and that's the safety Kyle Hamilton. Tell me a little bit about what he brings, Mike, as the backstop to that defense.
He's a 6'4" safety. I mean, what does he bring? He brings freakishness. I mean, that's what he is. He's smooth. He's in control out there. I mean, he's the safety of the NFL now. I mean, without a doubt, with what he can bring. Now, he's got to stay healthy. I know he's gotten tweaked a bit in the past, but I mean, he basically can do everything. And he's very smooth doing it. The thing I like about him is he makes up ground quicker than you think. And again, because he's 6'4", he's got those strides, he can do it. But man, having him back there has been really, really fun to watch and obviously get to enjoy it for one more year because this will obviously be it.
Yeah. We have a question from Leo in Chicago. This is kind of an inside question, but he wants to know, who is the modern day of the great sports information director, Roger Baldessari at Notre Dame today? Now, we know Roger. I worked for Roger as a student. Yes. You were a player. Yeah. Roger was here, one of the greats. I don't know who that would be. Guys, do you have any thoughts on that? Eric, Jamie?
Well, I think the sports information director game has changed. I don't know that, and I don't think there's ever going to be anybody like Roger. I mean, that's not a disrespect to anybody that's in the business now. I mean, Heisman, Theismann, that whole thing. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I think the job is different. I think there's a lot of really good people. And you know what? John Heisler's still bouncing around at UCF and doing a great job down there. But I admire all the people in that business, a lot of long hours and a lot of grumpy media to put up with.
I think their job descriptions have changed over the years. There's no doubt about that.
Definitely. And I know Fighting Irish Media has a Roger Baldessari scholarship or spot that they're working with as well. So that's great for ROV and his legacy here at Notre Dame. Hey, guys, let's go back one more time to the schedule, but we're running out of time here. But let's take a look at how things are going to line up for the Fighting Irish. Of course, we're starting at Florida State on Labor Day Sunday, the 5th at 7:30 national television. Great excuse to do something on Labor Day weekend. And then we come home for Toledo, first home game, hopefully full stands. That's what we're all planning on, full parking lots, etc. So How do you feel what do we need to do to get off on the right foot?
Well, I think they're going to get off on the right foot. I mean, as we've been talking about, Florida State they're going through it right now.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely going through it from what they were to what they are now. So, I mean, listen, Notre Dame should be able to take care of business out there, and I would expect the same thing in the next couple of games as well. And it would be very nice to manhandle Purdue with the new color guy, Drew Brees, calling from the booth there. The old Boilermaker there, take care of it. And then you get, Wisconsin, Cincinnati. I mean, Wisconsin, that game obviously was supposed to be last year or, in Green Bay. Unfortunately, no fans could go to any of those games. Now it's going to be in Chicago. But Cincinnati's really building their program. Fickle's doing a great job down there. So that's a 1-2 punch there. I think we got out of the gate 3-0 for sure. But then let's see what those two games bring back to back.
Guys, final comments. Jamie, what do you think on the schedule?
Yeah, I agree with Mike about those first three games. I think that you don't want to just glaze over those games, but I think, Wisconsin, that is going to be the first real test, right? And I think they bring a ton back from last year. They have and they're a great developmental program too, right? When they have guys that they've had and they've got a lot of guys who are 4th and 5th year players, that's when they're at their best, right? And they're going to be a physical team. They're one of the teams, one of the few teams that I think will probably match Notre Dame's physicality. So it's going to be a tough game, right? And, and obviously Jack Cohn, there's the storyline there going against his former team. And I agree with Cincinnati. I think it's that stretch that you mentioned, Pat, right? Where, you got Wisconsin, you got Cincinnati. That's going to be a tough game. Virginia Tech, I don't think Virginia Tech's great, but, you're going to Blacksburg, right? It's a road game, and it's sandwiched in between all these other games where between playing USC and North Carolina. And USC and North Carolina, to me, have the offensive talent that's probably going to be the toughest that Notre Dame's going to face there. So I think the season's really going to be determined how they handle that 5-game stretch, right? And they're going to have a open week there in between before USC. But, how can they stay healthy? I think they have good depth on the team, but can they stay healthy at the right spot? And I think a lot of those games are going to be 1-score games. And how's Notre Dame going to handle it? And, how's Jack Cohn going to handle it? Because Ian Book, that was one thing about him. He was a winner in those 1-score games. And now we got to find out what's the deal with Jack Cohn and a lot of the offensive pieces, and if they can come through when they're needed.
Eric, how about a final comment from you?
Well, that stretch is when the cornerbacks for Notre Dame have got to be healthy and good, because you've got first-round draft choices potentially with Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati, Keaton Slovis from USC, Sam Howell from North Carolina, and we think Graham Mertz is going to be a guy that plays pro football for Wisconsin someday, the guy that beat out Jack Cohn. So keep your eye on the quarterbacks in those games.
Excellent. I have one more plug to go here for the Notre Dame Senior Alumni. We've got a golf outing coming up the Thursday before the Purdue game. We hope that everyone will come out and participate at Warren. It's a great cause. It's a charity event. So that's Notre Dame Senior Alumni at Warren, September 16th. 1 o'clock. Mike has promised sunshine that day, which we really appreciate. And we look forward to having everybody out. Jamie Uyeyama of Irish Sports Daily, Eric Hansen of ND Insider, thanks guys for joining us. Mike, final comment from you tonight. We really appreciate you coming out today.
Listen, it's the start of a Notre Dame season, man. Students are back. I've been walking with my wife and I with the dogs. We take them around campus, and just to see everybody back, such a different atmosphere, obviously, than last year. At this point, the stadium going to be opened up for everybody. I mean, it is going to be, once we get a game here, it's going to be crazy here. And listen, it's Notre Dame football. I've said this forever. I got to play 9 years, fortunately, in the NFL, and I never had a feeling running out of a tunnel in the NFL that I did running out of the tunnel with my gold helmet on at Notre Dame. So it's just a special time. It's a special place, and hopefully the start of a very special season.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to our friends at the Notre Dame Alumni Association, the Senior Alumni Group. Thank you to the folks here at Notre Dame Studios for making this possible tonight. We certainly appreciate their help. Well, we're looking forward to the opener, Brian Kelly's 12th season, just 12 days away against Florida State. Till then, I'm Pat Scanlon. So long, everybody, and go Irish.